Okay, we're continuing with the book here, The Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers. We're doing Bertrand Russell. This is lecture number 2 on Bertrand Russell. I'm just going to tell you a little bit more background about him. And I think he's highly instructive to learn about him because he is a good example of how the billionaire perverts think of the regular people. And what I've also said, I talk to the proles, and the proles are so ignorant and stupid. They don't even know what I'm talking about. Then they look at me like, where do you get that information? Is that just your own idea? I'm like, you stupid idiot. This has been going on for over 100 years, okay? So Bertrand Russell, he did not believe in free will. He does not think that you have any brain, that you have any ability to make a choice for yourself. You're just a stupid animal that talks, okay? That is how they think of the proles. That's an important thing to understand. He also felt there had to be eugenics for the proles. There's just too many of these stupid, worthless people, and we have to reduce their numbers, okay? That has been felt for well over 100 years by the wealthy people who run the world, okay? He said that mentally defective people and the feeble-minded, they should be mandatorily sterilized. And that wasn't just his opinion. That was the opinion of Oliver Wendell Holmes, okay, the big famous judge in the USA. And they used to sterilize lots of people. It just kind of got a bad name after the Germans in the 1930s. But this was being done in the United States. And the Germans got ideas about mandatory sterilization and reducing the numbers of the stupid poor people. They got that from the United States, a lot of that information. So, people like to say, oh, the Germans were so bad. They got a lot of their ideas from the USA. They also saw what the USA did to the American Indians and how it chased them out of the country and got rid of them. And they're like, hey, that's a good idea. We should do that with our undesirable populations, okay? So I'm letting you know, this has a long history, this way of thinking, okay? Let's see. So he wanted population control, and he felt that they should research all the different methods they could use to reduce the number of the proles. Birth control, mandatory sterilization, whatever, you name it. He said they should be managed like farm animals, with their diet, their so-called education, etc. But also notice the double standard here. He himself had 4 wives and a bunch of kids, okay? And he cheated on his wives many, many times. So for him, because he's Mr. Wonderful, he should, just have a big harem, okay? But the proles, they should be mandatorily sterilized, these stupid proles. I'm letting you know, because in my experience, you can't even begin to think intelligently unless you know something about this. The first step to thinking intelligently in the modern world is to realize no one cares about you. Most people are indifferent to you, 99.9%, but there are people who hate you just for being who you are, And so you should sort of learn to watch out for yourself, because no one else is going to care about you. Your parents, maybe, if you're lucky. Your spouse, maybe, if you're lucky. Okay, he went and talked to Lenin. Why would Lenin speak with him, okay? Lenin doesn't speak with anybody. Lenin probably spoke with him because he thought they had some affiliation, okay, in terms of their ideas, all right? So that's a bad sign, okay? You think Lenin would talk to me? You think Putin would invite me for a conversation? Okay, here's some Bertrand Russell quotes. First one for today. Whereas in art, nothing worth doing can be done without genius. In science, even a very moderate capacity can contribute a supreme achievement. So basically, if you're going to be a magnificent painter, you got to be pretty brilliant, all right? But anybody can be part of a research team to do stuff in science. The great scientists are the ones that come up with great ideas and also that can write well, can turn things into a story, that can be a so-called architect or an innovator rather than, 99% of science in the modern world is either answering micro questions within the given paradigm or, being a sellout and doing stuff for corporations. Bertrand Russell, since proofs need premises, it is impossible to prove anything unless some things are accepted without proof. And that's like, Gödel's theorem right there, which is important to realize, okay? You can't do anything without making some assumptions, all right? Bertrand Russell, we advance our knowledge by logical inferences, okay? A little bit like the idea of inductive logic and consilience, which we talked about before. Bertrand Russell, emphatic and reiterated assertion, especially during childhood, produces in most people a belief so firm as to have a hold over their unconscious. Yeah, and I think that's a good thing in the sense that people should be trained in certain things. Kids should be educated in the Bible at a young age, okay? It makes people so smart. And what I've also noticed is, I'm not going to get into all this different stuff about religion and stuff. I'll save that for some other lecture. Okay, Bertrand Russell. Man is a credulous animal. He needs to believe in something. In the absence of good ground for belief, he will be satisfied with bad ones. No man can be a good teacher unless he has feelings of warm affection toward his pupils and a genuine desire to impart to them what he himself believes to be of value. So that's true too. A teacher should be a friend to the students, okay? It's not that important to grade them, it's important to guide them. And that's why a lot of times people tell you their parents were their best teachers, because the parents love the kid. They do what they can to help the kid. Okay, Bertrand Russell continues. When you want children to think, you begin by treating them seriously when they are little, giving them responsibilities, talking to them candidly, providing privacy and solitude for them, and making them readers and thinkers of significant thoughts from the beginning. That is if you want them to think. The billionaire perverts, they want centralized control of education and just rote memorization by the proles. The proles are not fit for understanding. They're only to be trained by memorization and obedience, compliance, okay? They're taught atheism, that life is meaningless, and all that matters is to obey the experts. Okay, but if you want people to think, you have conversations with them, you give them a chance to ponder something, you get them to like reading on their own, and you have discussions with them, which is like the Oxford tutoring system, basically, but, you know, with their parents initially, later on with professors. If the object of education were to make pupils think, rather than to make them accept certain conclusions, education would be conducted differently, quite differently. There would be less instruction and more discussion. There can be no agreement between those who regard education as a means of instilling certain definite beliefs versus those who think it should produce the power of independent judgment. Right. So memorization is how you, and repetition is how you train them to accept certain things, versus conversation, evaluation, independent study, privacy, solitude. That's how you develop the intellect as an individual. Okay, Bertrand Russell continues. What is the difference between a bright, inquisitive 5-year-old and a dull, stupid 19-year-old? 14 years of the British educational system. And I would agree with that too. If people met expectations, you know, I can remember when I was a young kid, I heard all kinds of things. Oh, this kid is so smart. Oh, this kid is a genius, you know. And then you'll hear things too about IQ distribution, about people with IQs in the 140s, 150s, 160s, 170s, 180s, and 190s even, okay? And my attitude is, where are they? I've been through Stanford, Northwestern, Harvard, all kinds of fancy medical places, and I spent a significant amount of time at other places like the Mayo Clinic, all the Harvard hospitals, and a bunch of other fancy academic places. And I'm telling you, there's not that many geniuses. There's not that many people who form. They might have had a high IQ when they were kids, but there's not that many people. Look on the internet at the YouTubers in the nutrition world. How many of them seem brilliant? Okay, there's not that many. So what I'm trying to say is, what happens to all these people? I know a lot of really smart doctors, and most of the really smart doctors I see, the guys who have, when I say smart, I mean, let's say IQ is 140 to 155, the ability to memorize the textbook, okay? Most of them, almost all of them, they memorize that textbook, they follow the billing code requirements, they make their money, and then they go have their personal life when they're not at work. They work for pretty good hours and they make their money, but what I'm trying to say is, you know, a genius transforms a field. They don't just learn something. They improve a field. They transform it. They discover things. They innovate. People like that are super rare. Super, super, super rare. Okay, Bertrand Russell continues. We are faced with the paradoxical fact that education has become the chief obstacle to intelligence and freedom of thought. Yeah, it's like John Taylor Gatto said. People were much smarter in the 1800s than they are now. They would routinely read 1,000-page books, whereas the average, you know, dummy nowadays can barely read, you know, anything beyond a Twitter message. Okay, I've had conversations with young people, and some young people they said, "Oh, you know, Dr. Rogers, your long videos are too long, but you know, some of your shorts were good." I'm like, okay, all right. Yeah, school's designed to make people stupid. We've talked about that before. I have a whole video on how to improve high school education. Bertrand Russell, men are born ignorant, not stupid. They are made stupid by education. We must have some concept of what person we wish to produce before we can have any definite opinion of the situation which we consider best. So that's what I'm trying to say. It's not a coincidence that they got the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, and the Bible out of the school. That's not a coincidence. That was done on purpose to make people stupid. It's not a coincidence that they stopped teaching about the American founding fathers as heroes, instead taught about them as racist scumbags, because they hate America and they want to destroy the place, okay? And they want to control the number of proles, okay? All these things are just part of this bigger picture of how to control the proles. And basically use them like farm animals, okay? It's always been like that. Do you remember if you saw the movie Braveheart? You know, when the King Longshanks of England, you know, sort of abusing the Scottish people, and there was a conflict between the British and the Scots, and he told his archers to fire even though the men were in the middle of a hand-to-hand combat. And they were shooting their own guys as well as the Scots. And one of the other Scotsmen said to King Longshanks, he says, "Why are you firing arrows? You're going to hit your own guys." And then King Longshanks said, "Well, we'll also hit them too." Meaning that he could care less about his own guys being hit. So that's what I'm trying to say. That's what I sort of see when I look at all this stuff. Okay, so what he's basically saying is, how can they've known a long time you can make an educational system. And this even goes farther back. This goes back to Fichte, the German, with regard to development of the Prussian school system. And it goes back farther than that. It goes back to the battle at Jena, where Napoleon kicked the butt off the Germans, and they were so surprised because they prided themselves on being very good in a military sort of way, and then they got their butt kicked by the French, you know, a bunch of cheese-eating weasels. How did that happen? So they decided to make their school system much more strict and to impose this like intense authoritarian command into the public school system. So kids would just say, "Yes, sir," and do whatever they're told without any thinking, without any questioning, because they wanted to train like soldiers like that. And later that was the idea, was when it came to America, using the Prussian educational system to train people to be stupid, obedient factory workers, okay? Part of the Industrial Revolution to get more labor out of them. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is this idea of conditioning education being used to train people to do something and make them stupid, that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. That's not like a new thing. Okay, Bertrand Russell. Teachers are more than any other class the guardians of civilization. Almost all education has a power motive. It aims at strengthening some groups in competition with other groups. It is this motive in the main which determines the subjects taught, the knowledge offered, and the knowledge withheld, and also decides what mental habits the pupils are expected to acquire. Hardly anything is done to foster the inward growth of mind and spirit. In fact, those who have had the most education are very often atrophied in their mental and spiritual life. Yeah, you'd be amazed at how stupid a lot of doctors are. The average doctor I know is polite, functional illiterate, and has not read much outside of the medical textbooks. And you know, they had to undergo that phase from, you know, first year of college all the way through residency, fellowship, and then making partner in their groups where they did virtually nothing other than medical stuff. So that's a long time, you know, like 16 years to only do medical stuff. And then finally, after you're exhausted by doing that for 16 years, then you want to have a family. And, you know, kids take time. Little kids often don't sleep well, and you're up at night with them. So they often, that's it. They don't ever read again. I mean, don't get me wrong, some do, but most don't. Okay, and that's also why I was like amazed. Why wouldn't any doctor want to learn about this vegan, low-fat vegan diet, the most powerful thing in all of healthcare? And they're just sort of mentally used up, and they don't ever sort of read in any significant way again. That's what I've seen. Or I'll see guys who will read a little bit of biographies here and there, just to, you know, because they're bored when they're commuting in their cars to work or something. But they don't have any intellectual passion to read and study that much. You know, and they're busy raising their kids. Okay, Bertrand Russell continues. Thought is not free if the profession of certain opinions makes it impossible to earn a living. Yeah, you can't be a college professor and be a conservative and a Christian nowadays. They'll fire you. They'll figure out some way to get you out. There's a purge. There is a purge of Christians in Western civilization, especially the white Christians, okay? And just look at it, how ridiculous it is. You know, I think I'm a good example. You know, on the one hand, I'm Puerto Rican. My mom's a real off-the-boat Spanish-speaking Puerto Rican, okay? Does that mean I'm a poor, helpless minority and I should be given free access to everything? oh, give me, free money, give me reparations, give me whatever job I want because I'm a minority. Or my father's from Ireland, and even though the Irish were slaves of the British for over 1,000 years, does that mean I'm an evil white male Christian and I should be forced out of society? It's insane. People don't understand. This is all a political game, and it's being done to destroy the United States. Okay, that's what it's all about. Okay, let us continue. Okay, so it says, thought is not free if the profession of certain opinions makes it impossible to earn a living. Thought is not free if all the arguments on one side of a controversy are perpetually presented as attractively as possible, while the arguments on the other side can only be discovered by a diligent search. That's what I was talking about, like with creatine. They put all the stuff that's anti-creatine under paywall, so you can't get that unless you pay your own money and all that stuff to the internet journal sites, versus all the stuff that says creatine is good. That's freely available everywhere because they want you to like creatine. Okay, and they do that with a lot of stuff. Okay, I got just a little more here today. He says, when we pass in review the opinion of former times, which are now recognized as absurd, it will be found that 9 times out of 10 they were as such to justify the infliction of suffering. Okay, and what I'm trying to say is all this stuff about political correctness, it is designed to inflict suffering on the white Christian male. Basically, he's being demonized, everybody else is being made a victim, and he has to be gotten rid of. And the reason they want to get rid of him is that he's the only person they respect. The billionaire perverts only respect the white Christian men. That's it. They think everyone else is either too small in number or too weak or too stupid, that they really don't matter. And they consider all women a joke, okay? That's why they want them educated so that they don't have babies. They want the smarter ones educated as much as possible so they'll stop having babies. And they don't respect women in general. They think women are very easy to trick with emotional nonsense, okay? They think only the white Christian man is the only one who could remotely possibly maintain freedom in the world. Therefore, he must be destroyed. So everybody else is a victim. Teach them to hate him. Use affirmative action, diversity in hiring, McKinsey Corporation, all these other places to take all the jobs away from him, to make him poor. The poorer you make him, the harder it'll be for him to get a woman, and the less likely he'll be able to reproduce, and that'll decrease the number of him. And eventually there'll be so few of them that all the other groups are too small in number or weak or stupid or whatever, or can be easily tricked, that it'll happen. That slavery will come back, eugenics, and all these other methods will come back. It's all, this has been planned for over 100 years, okay? And it's extensively written about. It's just that most people don't read, so they don't know it. Okay, Bertrand Russell continues. The thing that I should wish to obtain from money would be leisure with security. To teach men how to live without certainty and yet without being paralyzed by hesitation is perhaps the chief thing that philosophy can do. Okay, well, these philosophers, they're atheists. He's an atheist, and the philosophers often think they're so smart they don't need God. Yeah, right. And then you look at all the stupid stuff they do. Okay, Bertrand Russell. Free speech has been preserved, but its effective existence is disastrously curtailed if the important means of publicity are only open to opinions which have the sanction of orthodoxy. Yeah, anybody who says something that doesn't, that annoys the powers that be, they're like, oh, that's misinformation. Anyways, that's it for this part 2 about Bertrand Russell. Hope you found that helpful.